Africa has 5 years, maybe 10. After that, the window for industrialization closes forever. Europe had centuries. It burned coal, it polluted, it industrialized, and nobody stopped them. East Asia had decades. It built cheap goods, it moved up the value chain, and nobody stopped them. Africa has now, and it has to do what no one else ever had to do: industrialize without polluting, without cheap credit, and while the climate collapses beneath its feet. This is the paradox of the 21st century. The continent with the most resources is the one with the least time, and the world is watching. Africa has 5 years to get it right, or it never will. Europe industrialized over a century. It burned fossil fuels without constraint. It built factories, railways, and cities. The environmental cost was severe, but the economic gain was permanent. East Asia industrialized in decades. South Korea, Taiwan, China. They made cheap goods first, then electronics, then semiconductors. They climbed the ladder, step by step. Europe had centuries, Asia had decades, Africa has now. The world is decarbonizing. The era of cheap fossil fuels is ending. Africa cannot follow the old model. It cannot pollute first and develop later. The classic model is no longer viable. Africa must industrialize green, without coal, without cheap energy, without the fossil fuel subsidy that every other industrialized region enjoyed. Africa contributes less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The entire continent, 1.2 billion people, less than 4%, but it will pay the highest price. The Sahel is warming 1.5 times faster than the global average, while contributing less than 1% of emissions. The physics doesn't care about fairness. The physics doesn't care about fairness. This is the paradox. Africa needs to industrialize to escape poverty. The world needs Africa to stay green to escape climate collapse. Both cannot happen without a fundamental change. The Sahel, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, the front line of climate collapse. Temperatures rising faster than anywhere else on Earth. Desertification is reducing arable land by 50 to 200 kilometers southward over the past 30 years. Farmers are losing their fields. Pastoralists are losing their grazing land. When farmers lose their fields and herders lose their grazing land, they fight over water, over land, over survival. The conflict isn't ethnic. It's resource-driven, climate-driven. The Horn of Africa. The trap of extremes, prolonged droughts, then torrential floods, subsistence agriculture destroyed, food insecurity becomes famine. Rain doesn't come for years, then it comes all at once. The soil can't absorb it, the crops can't survive, the people are trapped between thirst and drowning. The West African coast, Lagos, San Luis, Abidjan. Sea levels are rising. Coastal erosion is accelerating. Aquifers are being salinized. Delta agriculture is being destroyed. These are not future problems. They are present problems. Millions of people are already being displaced, not across the Mediterranean, across their own countries. 80% of climate migration in Africa is intra-African. People don't go to Europe. They go to the next town, the next city, the nearest capital. Those cities are already overwhelmed. Infrastructure is collapsing. Water is scarce. Food is expensive. The pressure cooker is building. Climate pressure, urban collapse, secondary migration, international crisis. This is the chain, and it has already begun. Africa's total external debt exceeds $1 trillion. Annual service costs reach $163 billion. That's more than the continent spends on health and education combined. Countries like Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana spend between 30% and 60% of their tax revenue just to pay interest on past debts. Not the principal, just the interest. 30% to 60% of tax revenue goes to interest payments. This is not investment. This is financial strangulation. Structural adjustment programs were imposed in the 1980s. They forced privatization, deregulation, and austerity. They weakened the state. They opened economies to foreign capital. They created the dependency we see today. Structural adjustment was not about development. It was about access. Access for foreign capital, access for foreign corporations, access to Africa's resources. Eurobonds are commercial debt. They charge high interest rates because Africa is perceived as risky, but the risk is often mispriced or deliberately inflated. African countries pay 4 times more interest than the United States, 12 times more than Germany, on the same global markets, for the same kind of debt. This is not economics. This is perception. Resource-backed loans are worse. Debt secured against future mineral exports. If the price of cobalt or oil drops, the country loses revenue, and the debt is still owed. Sovereignty is lost. Debt collateralized against minerals, sovereignty sold for loans. The result is capex displacement. Investment capital is crowded out by debt service. Roads aren't built, ports aren't modernized, power plants aren't constructed. The infrastructure gap widens. Africa has 70% of the world's cobalt, vast reserves of lithium, manganese, platinum, and copper. The continent is sitting on the key to the global energy transition. Africa has the resources. China has the refineries. 80% of the world's cobalt and lithium refining happens in China. Africa exports the rock. China sells the product. This is the colonial model. Extract the raw material. Export it. Import the finished product. Capture zero value. Generate zero wealth. Build zero industry. The colonial model never ended. It was just rebranded. The Democratic Republic of Congo has 75% of the world's cobalt. The US wants it, China wants it, the DRC wants to process it locally. But processing requires energy, and energy requires investment, and investment requires infrastructure, and infrastructure requires debt. Guinea-Conakry has 25% of the world's bauxite. It is the second largest producer of the ore used to make aluminum. The Simandou iron ore mine may become the largest in the world. The benefits for the continent are infinitesimal, in the form of taxes and fees, only in those countries that are fiscally robust and that will not change in any summit organized by the US. Not to mention the human, social, and environmental losses suffered by communities where these mines are located. The Lobito Corridor, a 4,300-kilometer railway from the cobalt and copper mines of the DRC and Zambia to the Atlantic port of Lobito, Angola. The US and the EU have committed over $1 billion to rebuild it. The new scramble for Africa is not for land, it is for minerals, and Africa is watching. The AFCFTA is the largest free trade area in the world, 1.2 billion people, a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. It could transform the continent, but only if Africa can produce what its own people want to buy. 1.2 billion people, but can Africa produce for them, or will it just import more from China? Processing minerals is not just digging them up. It requires enormous amounts of electricity, reliable, continuous, cheap electricity, the kind of baseload power that Africa lacks. 600 million Africans have no access to electricity. That's more than the population of North America. Without power, you cannot process minerals. Without processing, you cannot industrialize. Without industrialization, you cannot escape poverty. Refining also requires sophisticated chemicals, proprietary technology, and highly trained personnel. Africa has the resources. It does not have the technicians. It does not have the technology. It does not have the energy. Africa has the rock. It does not have the refinery. International investors prefer not to take political risk. They will not build heavy refining infrastructure in volatile regions. They will not invest where the legal system is weak. They will not stay where the power grid is unreliable. Capital goes where it is safe, not where it is needed. Every attempted industrial project faces the same roadblocks. No power, no capital, no technicians, no market access. The continent is trapped in a vicious cycle of dependency. China understood this. It offers infrastructure loans in exchange for resource concessions. It builds ports, railways, and power plants. In return, it gets access to the minerals. It is a trade-off, and Africa is forced to accept it. China builds the infrastructure. Africa pays with the minerals. In February 2026, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance proposed a new trade bloc for critical minerals. It would stabilize prices, protect supply chains, and give Africa a seat at the table. But critics are skeptical. The U.S. is reacting to China, not helping Africa, said Mohammed Ba. All those resources are in African soil, but it is not even Africa that exploits them, but American, Chinese, and other companies. The EU has its own approach. It demands ESG standards, due diligence, and regulatory compliance. It wants green minerals from green sources, but it does not finance African industrialization. The EU asks for ESG compliance. It does not pay for the compliance. It demands standards that Africa cannot afford to meet. Africa is caught between three competing powers. Each one wants its resources. Each one offers something different. None of them are offering true industrial development. This is the 21st century scramble for Africa. It is not about territory. It is about supply chains, critical minerals, the future of the global economy. The scramble is not for land. It is for the energy transition. African countries are becoming savvier. Guinea-Conakry's president, Mamadi Doumbouya, said at the UN in 2023, "Our country is not for France or Russia, nor for China or the US, but for Guinea-Conakry." There are indications that producing countries are forcing the hand of companies to break with the past extractive model and begin to process the mineral before exporting it, said Bernabe Sanchez, a mining economist. The shift is happening. Countries are banning raw mineral exports. They are demanding local processing. They are forcing the world to recognize that Africa's resources belong to Africa. 1 trillion in external debt, more than the GDP of most African countries combined. $163 billion per year in debt service. Tax revenue, 30–60% to interest. The rest to salaries, administration, and essential services. Nothing left for investment, nothing left for industry, nothing left for the future. 600 million Africans without electricity. That is 600 million people who cannot run a factory, power a hospital, or charge a phone. Africa's population is 1.2 billion. It will double by 2050. That is 2.4 billion people, every one of them needing food, water, jobs, and opportunity. Africa holds 70% of the world's cobalt. DRC alone has 75% of global reserves. The world's electric vehicles depend on it. 80% of cobalt refining is in China. Less than 5% is in Africa. The value chain is not African. The wealth does not stay. The AFCFTA could create a 3.4 trillion market, the largest free trade area in the world by population. The potential is enormous. The challenge is implementation. 70 million people live in the Sahel. Their temperatures are rising 1.5 times faster than the global average. Their land is turning to desert. 80% of climate migration is intra-African, not across the Mediterranean, not to Europe, just to the next town, the next city, the next pressure cooker. Africa contributes 4% of emissions. It pays 100% of the cost. Africa has more natural resources than any other continent. It has the youngest population. It has the fastest growing economies. And it is trapped. Africa is not poor. Africa is exploited. The colonial model never ended. It was repackaged. Independence gave political freedom. Structural adjustment took economic sovereignty. Debt kept the continent subservient. The system was built to extract, not to develop. The AFCFTA is a gamble. It is an attempt to create a unified African market, to replace external dependency with internal integration, to industrialize for Africans, not for China, Europe, or the US. Integration is the only path. The question is, can it happen in time? 5 years, maybe 10, before the window closes. Before the climate makes industrial agriculture impossible, before debt makes investment impossible, before the population outstrips the resources. The window is closing, and Africa is not ready. Europe had centuries. It had coal. It had colonies. It had the luxury of time. East Asia had decades. It had export markets. It had Cold War patronage. It had the benefit of external demand. Africa has now. It has no coal. It has no time. It has no unconstrained credit. It has the world's demands on its minerals, and it has the world's expectations of its emissions. The world expects Africa to save the planet, while it saves itself. Physics does not care about fairness. Markets do not care about justice. The climate does not care about history. The only thing that matters is what Africa does now. We are the first generation to face this reality, and we will not be the last. The future belongs to those who build it. Africa has the resources, it has the population, it has the potential. The question is, will it have the agency? Africa has 70% of the world's cobalt. It has 1.2 billion people. It has the youngest population on Earth. And it is trapped in a system designed to extract, not develop. Africa's time is running out. Not because of lack of resources, but because of the system. The financial system, the industrial system, the political system. Every dollar of debt service is a dollar not spent on schools, hospitals, roads, or power plants. Every loan is another constraint on sovereignty. Every repayment is another year of poverty. Colonialism was physical. Neocolonialism is financial. The AFCFTA offers a way out, a unified market, a trading bloc, the chance to industrialize for Africa, not for export. But it requires implementation, it requires infrastructure, it requires capital, and it requires time. The AFCFTA is not the solution, it is the opportunity. The climate is not waiting. The Sahel is warming 1.5 times faster than the global average. The Horn is alternating between drought and flood. The coast is eroding. The clock is ticking. The physics doesn't care about Africa's development. But we should. The scramble for Africa is not over. It has just changed form. It is not about land. It is about minerals, cobalt, lithium, copper, the raw materials of the energy transition. Africa is not a battlefield. It is a continent with a future. The new resistance is happening. Countries are banning raw mineral exports. They are demanding local processing. They are forcing the world to recognize that Africa's resources belong to Africa. The shift is happening, but it may be too slow. Africa's future is not written. It is being written now, by its people, by its leaders, by its choices. The world is watching, and Africa is deciding. 5 years, maybe 10. The window is closing. The train is leaving. And Africa is still at the station. The continent that has 5 years left. What will it do? Africa is not poor. Africa is resource-rich. Africa is young. Africa is full of potential. Potential is not destiny. It is a choice. The sun rises over Africa every day. Will it rise over a continent that industrialized? or a continent that fell behind? The answer depends on decisions made now. The universe is watching. Are we paying attention? Africa has 5 years, maybe 10. After that, the window for industrialization closes forever, and the world will be watching. The clock is ticking. The resources are there. The population is there. The potential is there. The only thing missing is agency, the ability to decide its own future. Agency is the key, and Africa is reaching for it. The AFCFTA is a collective effort. The African Union is a collective effort. Pan-Africanism is a collective effort. The future is not individual. It is collective. The future is collective, or it is nothing. Will Africa industrialize in time? Will it escape the trap of extraction? Will it build a future for its people? We don't know, but we are watching. The continent with the most resources is the one with the least time. It is the paradox of the 21st century, and it is the defining challenge of our generation. The universe is watching. Are we paying attention?